Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today to discuss an important issue. 3 years ago, I was proud to join MPP Sherry DeNovo and MPP Christine Elliott in co-sponsoring and passing Toby's Act, which protects the human rights of trans Ontarians. I want to sincerely thank both of them for their advocacy on this issue and for championing the human rights of all Ontarians. Both were invited to today's press conference. I'm very happy to see that MPP Sherry DeNovo is here with us. We provided multiple times to MPP Elliott as well to attend this press conference, but unfortunately she is not available today. Governments of all stripes have a duty to protect and strengthen human rights for everyone in Ontario and across Canada. And the protection of gender identity and gender expression is crucial to making sure human rights are indeed lived rights. They signify that we are all equal and recognize that Ontario is an inclusive place that celebrates our diversity. I was pleased to join MPP DeNovo, Minister Glenn Murray, recently retired Ontario Human Rights Commissioner Barbara Hall, and many community advocates earlier this year to announce a new policy for the admission, classification, and placement of transgender inmates in provincial correctional institutions. It is the most comprehensive policy in Canada for respecting the human rights and related needs of trans individuals in correctional facilities. This new policy promotes fairness and safety of all inmates and correctional staff. And it is among the most progressive in North America, reflecting consultation from civil liberties groups, correctional union partners, advocacy groups, and community organizations. This policy was both an important step forward in recognition and protection of trans rights and a symbol of the importance that all policies and all parts of society, whether a school, a workplace, or a correctional facility, must protect and promote the human rights of all because it is at the core of our value as a society. This new policy for our correctional facilities builds on the legacy of Toby's Act. I remember standing in the legislature the day the legislation passed. I watched as MPPs said with their vote that human rights are greater than ideology. Ontario became the first province in Canada to specifically protect gender expression and gender identity under the Ontario Human Rights Code. That is why our government is greatly disappointed by recent actions in the Senate to weaken Bill C279, the Transgender Bill of Rights, which would add gender identity to the Federal Human Rights Code. It is why MPP DeNovo and I felt it was important to draw attention to these regressive amendments by the Conservative senators. This federal legislation, which follows Ontario's lead on enshrining gender identity and gender expression, has passed in the House of Commons with the support of all three parties. However, recently, Conservative senators injected amendments into the bill at the Senate Standing Committee that would, in essence, gut this important and much needed human rights legislation. These amendments would exclude federal correctional institutions, crisis shelters, and washrooms at airports, permitting the continued discrimination based on gender identity. It is troubling to think that if this bill passed as amended, basic human rights for transgender individuals protected by this bill would stop at the doors of airports and federal correctional institutions. As a recent editorial in the Ottawa Citizen stated, and I quote, "What is clear is that the vulnerable persons in these scenarios are trans people, especially trans women. This bill condones sending trans women to male prisons. It tells trans women they ought to be using male washrooms despite the risk of ridicule, persecution, and violence. It condones denying trans women access to services such as women's shelters and crisis centers." Our government stands firmly on the side of expanded human rights protections and strongly opposes these wrong-headed amendments and call on the federal government and Senate to oppose these amendments, vote them down, and pass this bill in its original form immediately. It is long overdue. We were proud that all three parties supported Toby's Act in 2012, a bill co-sponsored by an MPP from each political party. We hope that all MPPs from all parties support the call we are making today, that the Harper government reverse the unfair amendments that hurt transgendered Ontarians. This is the only way to ensure that federal human rights code in fact covers every person in every place across Ontario and the country. Thank you, and I'm open to take any questions that you may have.